Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you guys for being such an amazing community so far and for all of your support. You guys have been amazing and it's been so much fun to create content for the One Piece TCG. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of July. If we hit that goal, I'll be doing an awesome giveaway with custom One Piece cards that you won't want to miss. And so let's make it happen together, and thanks again for being awesome. Hey everyone, it's Adakai TCG here, and I have a very special video for you today. I will be doing a series of videos that talks through the matchups that Bonney has against the other meta decks. I've been doing a ton of playtesting and compiled some information that may help understand each of these matchups. So today we'll be focusing on the Bonney vs Enel matchup, and I've broken it down into just 5 tips that will help you better understand and hopefully win this matchup. And so if you aren't a Bonney main though, don't worry. These 5 tips can still help you recognize the conditions and setups that you'll want to have in your matchup against Enel. And so again, if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. I am trying to hit 1K subs by the end of July, and it just really helps support this channel and me and my content creation journey. So I appreciate y'all. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to go over are just some key cards that will really help in our matchup against Enel. And so the first card I want to go over is Basil Hawkins. He is the new OP07 Basil Hawkins, 6 cost, 7k power. He does have the blocker attribute because we are running a Supernova's leader. And the ability that we really care about too is that once per turn, if this character would be removed from the field by your opponent's effects, you may rest one of your opponent's characters instead. And so this is a very sticky card. It forces the Enel to either swing into it to remove it or play a Kingdom Come when all of his characters are rested. And so either way, it's a card that's going to really stick on the board. And so I love to establish at least 2 of these on the field just to have them there. They're blockers, which is great, as well as they're going to help contribute to closing out the game at the end of the game. And so we'll go over more of that in the tips section, but this is a card that you definitely need to see. It makes the matchup much easier, and yeah, fantastic card. We also have Hody Jones. He is from the OP06 series, and he's a 7 cost, 8k power, but we really like him because he has rush, and so everyone knows against Enel, sometimes we need that one extra swing. Hody Jones can really give us that additional swing to close out a game. And so really good card, great in the late game. Yeah, you want to see at least one of these cards as well. And so we also have Jewelry Bonney. This is the OP07 new 5 cost Bonney that we have. She's a 5 cost, 6k power, does have a 1k counter on it, but on play, up to one of your opponent's rested characters or Dawn cards will not become active in your opponent's next refresh phase. And so really flexible effect. Honestly, I found great use of it towards the mid to late game. When you're playing this, you can keep one of your opponent's rested Dawn locked. And so it limits what they can play in the crackback, right? And so against the Enel player, if you're playing this on 8, they can't Yamato then on their 9 Dawn turn. If you're playing this on 9, then they can't Ace on their 10 Dawn turn because you've locked one of their Dawn. And so really good card. We'll talk about some more flexible ways you can play this and when you can drop it to really kind of seal a game. But yeah, this is also really great to the matchup. Then we also have some additional boss monster cards I want to talk about. We do have the 10 cost Doflamingo, and if you guys aren't familiar, he is the one that on play up to a total of 3 of your opponent's rested characters or leader cards cannot become active until their next refresh phase. And so it's a great card for buying us another turn. And it's quite sticky as well, because the only way the Enel player can remove it, other than swinging really high into it, is to play Kingdom Come. And so it does, we'll talk about that in one of the future tips though, but it can be removed by Kingdom Come. A lot of Enel players are running 4 of these cards, so just know that. But again, Doflamingo is a great card that's sticky, that you can establish, and oftentimes will help you close out a game. We also have Verona Zoro. This is the OP06 secret rare. 9 cost, 9k power. He is the Zoro that can attack 3 times, so everyone knows we need plenty of attacks into Enel. And so if this Zoro sticks, you're Gucci. You can threat lethal just with this character. And so very, very good card. Just be careful about, and just be cognizant that Enels do run Beige. And so if Beige triggers, this Zoro is not going to continue swinging. And so just be cognizant of that. Lastly, I do want to talk about Kid and Rosinante. And so this is the 8-drop Kid, 8k power, the one where you can attach a Dawn to it. And on your opponent's turn, if this character is rested, they can attack any other card other than Eustace Captain Kidd for their turn. And it has the activate main. Once per turn, you may rest this character and play 1 character card with a cost of 3 or less from your hand. And so the reason why I do want to mention this card, he does have a glaring weakness against Enel, which is the Katakuri. And so a lot of Enels are running 4 copies of Katakuri as well, so just be cognizant of that. He can get put back into your life. But if you're playing this kid out with Rosinante, the opponent no longer has a viable way to remove that kid with like something like Kingdom Come, because Rosinante can just tank that hit. And so it does force your opponent to play the Katakuri, meaning that they won't be healing for that turn if they want to get rid of the kid, because they're putting the kid back in your life and not putting anything back in their life. And so there is some merit to, when you do drop the kid, to force your opponent to play a certain way or have to deal with yet another sticky card. And so I did want to kind of give that shout out and that nuance there, because yeah, anytime we are controlling how our opponent has to play, we are kind of in control. And so yeah, and that's very in line with Green's mentality. But yeah, those are the important cards I kind of wanted to go over. And then now we'll dive right into the 5 tips. All right, so tip number 1, understanding lethal. So this is just a very basic tip, but make sure you understand how to achieve lethal on Enel. There are minimum conditions, which is if the Enel is at 1 life, you need at least 2 characters on the board that can swing, including your leader. And so, yeah, basically because the Enel ability, even if he's at 1 life, they will heal 1 life through their leader effect, and then you need to have that last swing to go for lethal after the 2 lives. And so you need a minimum of 2 characters. But this is also why Basil Hawkins is really ideal to have established on the board. And so, again, in your matchups, you may be tempted to play things like Cavendish, your Rouge, which are great in the earlier games, but honestly, on your 6th Dawn turn, you are wanting to set up the Basil Hawkins. Just get them on the board, get them to stick. You're going to hit your lethal condition sooner, and you'll find that you're going to force your opponent to play a certain way for the remainder of the game once you have 2 of these on the board. And so if you can establish 2, that's fantastic. They're so hard to remove for Enel. They're so annoying because they are at the 7k power, meaning that once we do start swinging with them, the Enel is forced to counter out with quite a lot or take their life. And so just understand that condition, and again, our top priority is to set up 2 Basil Hawkins. Tip number 2, leaving the Enel at 2 life. And so this is something that I've learned just through a lot of playtesting, but yeah, leaving the opponent at 2 life means they're not getting the max value from their boss monsters. And so, for example, a lot of the Enels are now running the 10-drop Secret Ace, the one that heals them and gains rush if they have 2 or less life. When they're at 2 life though, that ace now will either just give them a life and not have rush, or they won't be gaining a life, they'll have the rush, and in which case they're not getting that maximum value. And so you're basically negating them from getting 1 more card, 1 more trigger, or not having the 10k attack that they may need ace to be. And so really good to leave them at 2 life. Same with Yamato then. They cannot heal because Yamato heals only when they're down to 1 life, and they can only KO with that. And so anytime you're negating the full effects of these cards, you are giving yourself those slight advantages. Over time, that's going to keep adding up and help you win the matchups. And so, the last tip just says it keeps their hand size down until you're ready to go for their board, or ready to go with your board rather. And so, yeah, try leaving the Enel at 2 life until you've established your board out. You'll find that it really does kind of help within that matchup. Tip 3, if they Kingdom Come, they can't heal. And so this is a concept that I've learned through just a lot of rigorous playtesting. Kingdom Come is a 6-cost card, meaning they can't remove your big body and heal at the same turn. And so sometimes it does come to this baiting out the Kingdom Comes. And this is also why tip number 1 so great, because if you have 2 Basil Hawkins established on the board, you drop your Dofi. They're forced to either respond with another big body from theirs and heal, or Kingdom Come and remove your big body, in which case you still threaten their life with the 2 Basils and your leader swing. And so it's a really good condition to have if you can establish the 2 Basils and then start just dropping your big bodies. And one thing that I've tried to do too is baiting out the number of Kingdom Comes that the player has. So I always assume that they have at least 1 in hand, because Enel tends to draw a lot of cards with things like Shirahoshi, Egghead Luffy, among other cards that help them draw, like you're running the Flampe. And so I assume they have at least 1 or 2. So if you do have the option to, sometimes I'll bait it out with Dofis and then establish a Zoro later, in which case that Zoro sticks a little bit more and then you are in a good spot. And so, but again, it all depends on your hand as well, but these are just little tips and tricks that I've tried. You can make an argument for baiting the Kingdom Come out with Zoro and then locking their big bodies with Dofi as well and going for game. Either way, I think just understanding the concept that if they have to Kingdom Come, they can't heal, can help you set up these conditions to help you go for game. Tip number 4 is to attack flexibly. And so this is a little bit of a trickier and more nuanced tip, but understanding the conditions to force counters out of your opponent's hand is very key in this matchup. This is what's going to help you diminish the rather large hand size that most Enel players play with and start chipping down and setting up an easier lethal when you're ready to go for it. But yeah, once you've established 2 characters on the board and the Enel's at 1 or 2 life, you have the conditions to start forcing counters, right? And so again, a lot of times I do like to swing with my leader first, because we have the luxury of knowing that the Basil Hawkins can't be KO'd by things like Onami, triggers, or things like that, because yeah, it's above the threshold of cost. And so oftentimes I like to swing with my leader first in that case, and then start to see what the opponent does, right? If they take the first attack, I can keep swinging, meaning that we can get them down to 0 life or force a ton of cards out of their hands with the high cost blockers, or high statted blockers that we have, right? And so yeah, and it's a bonus then if you can say you have the 2 Basils on the board and your leader swing, you leader swing first, they take it, you start swinging higher with the next Basil Hawkins. If they take that life and go down to 1 life after they use your leader ability, you can swing even higher with the last Basil Hawkins to force a bunch of counters out of your opponent's hand, or force them down to be at 0 life, and then play out something like your 5-cost Bonney to lock their Dawn, then you are in a great spot. This is a play that I love to do, and it's quite feasible to do because Bonney does have quite a bit of searchers that'll help you set up your hand to establish a board like that. And so, yeah, then your opponent's forced to either Yamato, which they'll probably only hit the Bonney if they've left you at 5 life, in which case you still can go for lethal in the crackback, or they're, you know, gonna have to do something else and not heal, and then even then that's just not great for them either. And so really good way to chip down the opponent's hands. But if they do counter out of the first attack, what I often opt to do is just establish a big body, and so I'll leave my Basils up. They countered out of that first swing, so I'll establish like a Zoro, a Dofi, a Kid, and then just say pass, right? And then now it comes down to your opponent being forced to choose between using Kingdom Come on the big body you established or dropping a big body of their own. They can't do both, and so you're still in a great spot. Tip number 5 is knowing when to go for a game. So this is a mistake I keep seeing from certain players and certain people that I've just been observing. Sometimes dragging out the game, well, not sometimes, most of the time dragging out the game will actually increase Enel's chance at winning, right? They're running so many boss monsters, and with their innate ability just to keep healing with Enel, you don't have that same sustain, and most likely you don't have the same number of boss monsters that they're running. So the more you drag out a game, the more Enel has a chance to just taking the game. And so understanding that flow and state of the game will really help you close out these matches against Enel, and just knowing when to go for game, because there's gonna be a shift in the tide once the Enel start to establish and stabilize with their big bodies and their healing. They are just in too good of a spot to really close the game out against. And so I guess, yeah, this tip is just basically understanding some time between the mid and late game, the Enel player will stabilize with their big bodies. And so once you have the conditions that we've talked about in tips 1 through 4, just go for it. You know, you need to close the game out against Enel, or else you will end up losing the game. Most of the time. And so, yeah, this tip is a little bit more nuanced in understanding the conditions. Maybe in a future follow-up video, I'll showcase some matches and showcase this tip specifically, ways to recognize it. And so just know at a certain point, if you have the conditions to get lethal, it's worth going for it. And a bonus tip, so I guess it's really 6 tips, but this is just more so for everyone's sanity. Triggers happen, guys. Yellow is bound to hit triggers. It's best not to let an Enel match tilt you for the rest of your games. Just understand, yeah, when you're playing against yellow, they are bound to hit triggers. Sometimes it will be that 0-cost event that heals them an extra life, or a beige that stops you from attacking, and Enel will arbitrarily just take the game. It happens, and if they high roll, they high roll. You know, we are playing a card game with probabilities, and so sometimes people have just great luck, and then they will trigger everything they need to just negate your plans. Don't let it tilt you. These things do happen. But what we can do is be flexible when we do go for game and we do attack, right? And so calculate triggers into your game plan. Again, if the minimum condition to win is having 2 characters with Enel at 1 life, maybe go for game once you safely establish 3 characters, or when you have a Hody Jones in hand. just be aware that triggers can happen, right? And so it's more so for your own sanity. And yeah, just make sure, if that does happen to you, I'm sorry. It sucks, and yellow will always be yellow, but there will be other games, and they won't always hit those triggers all the time, you know, even if it feels that way. But yeah, these are my 5 tips that I have as I'm playing Bonney into Enel, or rather 6 tips. If you guys do like this sort of content, please let me know in the comments below. I can start providing some more tips and tricks when you have Bonney versus the other meta matchups. But yeah, I did want to decide to make this series because I do think Bonney is one of the most complex leaders to pilot, because it does force you to play differently into each meta matchup quite significantly. But Bonney is the most consistent though, because we do have the toolkits and the searchers to pick out the pieces that we want to see for the matchup too. And so these are just things that I've learned in my experience. If you guys have found other tips or tricks that help into this matchup, I do want to hear about it below as well. I'm always trying to learn. And so yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.